God's word helps us find reasons for that hope. Now I want to stay with Pope Francis just for a bit, because I was there in that matter. Can you see that thing? Feel free to move to any part of the room if you can't see the screen, because some of these images might be helpful. I was there when Pope Francis came out on the balcony. That's March 13, 2013. And I was sent to or asked by the Jesuit General to go to Rome to be a visiting professor at our Pontifical Gregorian University. St. Ignatius founded it. It was then called the Roman College, later was renamed the Gregorian University. And so 1540 it was founded by Ignatius, and we've been running it ever since. It's over near the Trevi Fountain. If you know Rome at all, it's 2 blocks from the Trevi Fountain. And I was there as a visiting professor of communications. 4 gigs I had, it was fantastic. A semester every 2 years, and that went over 8 years. The last time I was there, Benedict announced within a week or so of arriving that he was resigning. And Rome loves rumours, they love secrets. And the best kept secret was the Pope was about to resign. And the whole city went into meltdown because cardinals didn't know, and all these people who know everything didn't know. We now know 3 people knew. Pope Benedict's spiritual director and confessor, his private secretary, and him. And I assume God knew, but that's we assume they're the only people who knew. And so the whole place goes into a frenzy. Now normally they have to prepare a funeral, and everyone comes for the funeral, and the cardinals come from all over the world. Of course, that didn't happen on this particular occasion. So it was quite a night when we all gathered in the square. But just thinking about what we might be doing soon, sadly, if Pope's health doesn't recover as well we hope it would and does, isn't it extraordinary that what we do in the Catholic Church is lock up roughly 120 men and they communicate to the world via a chimney stack? Isn't that magnificent? The drama of it, the liturgy of it is absolutely extraordinary. Like, you could send a tweet, couldn't you? But or send out a fax in the old days. We talk via a chimney stack. So what happened on this occasion is the cardinals all get together and have what they call a consistory, where they then talk about the issues of the church, and they're actually getting to know each other. They don't actually know each other very well. And so they're sizing each other up, and there's talk about who are the candidates, and they're talking to them and discovering who might be the best leader for us at this moment. Well, also what happened is that the world's media then descend on Rome, and they just want to fill up the time. They want talking heads on anything they can get their hands on. And I was picked up by a few people. ABC Radio sent Gerald Dugover, and I was picked up by RTE, the National Broadcaster of Ireland. I was picked up by the Canadian Broadcasting for Television, Sky News UK. And honestly, they didn't really care what you said. I didn't know very much about papal elections, but I was about half a chapter ahead of them, but I sounded really authoritative. And I discovered they wanted to know the oldest pope, the youngest pope, the shortest pope, the Pope Alexander IV, who was supposed to be celibate but had 8 children, and one of the other, I think it was Urban II, whose grandson was made a cardinal at the age of 3. And they loved all of this stuff, they loved it. And but it was quite extraordinary, and it was a bit of fun, to be honest. But one of the people that I said I was picked up by was RTE. And RTE took it pretty seriously, the Irish broadcaster, their ABC. They sent that guy, who's a man called Sean O'Rourke. His brother is a Jesuit in Ireland, but Sean was a finance journalist who then ended up being one of the most celebrated broadcasters in Ireland. And he was at that stage doing the Drive Time show. Now, the Irish, by the way, are the biggest listeners of radio per capita in the world. Nobody listens to radio as much as they do. And so the Drive Time show is one of their big shows, and he had been a political and economic journalist, and it's pretty serious radio. It's not rock and bubble, they have very serious analyses that goes on in their shows. So he comes to Rome, they're doing it live, back to Dublin. And on the Sunday, the cardinals eventually go into the conclave, and then there are 3 votes a day, 2 in the morning, 1 in the afternoon, and you get the smoke after each of them. So on Monday afternoon, the first day they're in, we had 2 lots of black smoke, and I'm now on the Drive Time show with another Irishman called Gerard O'Connell. Gerard O'Connell was for the Irish Times and a few other outlets, the Vatican correspondent for about, well, so far, 46 years. And he knows everybody and everything. He's lived in Rome for all of that time, about what that was all about. But by ancient and magnificent custom, how Rome told the city that they had a new bishop, the Bishop of Rome, his most important title, of course. And then is that they used to ring the bells, because not everybody could be in the square to see the smoke. So they have on standby the ringers of the bell at the St. Peter's, and then all these captains of belfries are there, and if they hear the bells, they start ringing their bells. And so this cacophony of sound starts all over Rome. Now you think you might be able to work that one out. I thought to myself, I wonder why are those bells? There's a conclave on you, idiot, I said to myself. And so as I was about to press the button to go back up to the top floor of the Jesuit residence of the Gregorian, a Polish nun in all the regalia, veil and whipple and coif, oh my God, came around and went, Bianca Mamane, Bianca Mamane. My sister was very excited. White smoke, white smoke. Well, now I was excited because she was too. And so I thought, well, I better rush over to the square because, you know, I may never get to this moment ever again. That is, until I am elected the Pope myself. And Pope Dick I from tomorrow. That's going to be a winner. And I didn't have to rush because it takes a hell of a long time from the time that the smoke goes up. It takes about an hour and a half, or this is what it did this on this occasion. Now, if you look at that very carefully, I'm sitting there at the two Bernini fountains at the front, on the right and on the left. As you're looking at on the left-hand side, that's not working, and that was great because the right-hand one was spraying everybody within the cooey of it, but the left-hand one, I could sit up because you're there a long time. So I sat up on the lip of it. And in front of me is a screen because up to the balcony is actually a long way away. It's deceptive. And so in fact the screen was extremely helpful and of course everybody was now wanting to know who do you think, who do you think, who do you think? And I kept saying, oh, the dark horse is going to be the series. And out comes a French cardinal who then announced that we have a pope, the place goes nuts, and then he says it's Cardinal Bergoglio from Buenos Aires. So now I'm a prophet as well. And then the pope came out on the balcony. Now, think about this whenever you look at Buckingham Palace again. There's no royal family that sends people out on the balcony on their own. You have never seen the Queen on her own. Because actually it's pretty intimidating, even though you might get used to it as you grow up with it. But he looked like he was just a stunned mullet before that. He was completely on his own initially anyway. And it was pretty cruel. He looked as I don't know what's happened. And we didn't know what happened. The Argentinians went berserk. It was fantastic. And then eventually he's joined by a few of the other cardinals, and he did one of the most extraordinary things. He asked us to come to silence, and I'm there with my 80,000 closest friends, and we came to silence, and then he said, I want you to do something for me. And he speaks perfect Italian, you know, his mother and father are Italian, but he was born in Argentina. And he said, I want you to bless me. In written history, we have no pope that has ever asked that congregation, or any congregation. He's the one who does the blessings, thank you very much. And his first act to the church was to bow in front of all of us and for us to bless. I have never heard corporate silence like it in my life. There was something deeply moving. Everybody just came to this silence. No one said a word, no one sang a song, and we just prayed for him. And then when he got up, he said, the one thing that I want to be more than anything else is an apostle for peace and hope in the world. Well, that's one of the reasons why we now have this Jubilee of hope. Now, you've heard me say this before, but I'm going to say it again. Numbers matter in the Bible. They're not random. 1, 3, 7, 12, 40, and 50. You've heard me say this over the many years that you poor people have been putting up with my preaching. But 1 is God's number, the perfect number. The number of unity. 3, on the third. It's not by accident that Jesus is getting out of the tomb on the third day. Anything in a multiple of 3 in the Bible is the breakthrough of God into the world. So there are lots of 6s and 3s all throughout the Bible, and it's code. There is numerology in the Bible. I don't want to go too far with this, but it is symbolically important. So Jesus is out of the tomb on the third day. Man and woman are created on the third day. And then creation is finished on the 6th. Again, the breakthrough of God in the world. And then we go to 7. People say there are 7 days of creation. There are not. There are 6, because on the last day, God has a day off. It's the oldest labour law in the world. And you know, as a result of that labour law, everyone got a day off in Israel. You couldn't work people every day. That's why the Sabbath was holy. If God took a day off, you get a day off. And God, of course, doesn't do anything on the last day. She looks at creation and says, what a smarty pants am I? She delights. It seems to come as a surprise that she's done such a wonderful job. It's absolutely a knockout. Then we have 12, the 12 tribes of Israel. So we get the 12 apostles, because 12 men, because we have 12 tribes, 12 patriarchs, 12 apostles. We've been living with them all out of that ever since. But the 12 apostles, it's the 12 tribes of Israel. 40, a time of formation. Jesus wasn't literally in the desert for 40 days. He was there figuratively or symbolically. 40 days and 40 nights for Noah. 40 years for the Israelites in the desert. 40 days and 40 nights for Solomon. Big conversion moment in the temple, and then 40 days for Jesus. And if you really know your Bible, then you know that it's 40 days between the resurrection and the ascension in Luke and Acts of the Apostles and the Gospel of Luke, who tell us about all these things. So it's a time of formation, that's what it means. And if you're like me and you've been a bit pathetic over the years, you'll know you've actually sat down and counted the days in Lent, and you might know there are in fact not 40 days in Lent. There are 45 days in Lent, because a Sunday in Lent is not ever, should never have been a day of penance. You should have been eating chocolate on every Sunday in Lent as a child. You can have a drink. Now you can keep the 45 days if you want to. That's great. I'm not telling anybody what to do. But Sundays are never counted. Since the day of the resurrection, all Sundays are therefore days of the resurrection. And it's meant to be a moment where there is no penance. It's not meant to do penance on Sundays. So there are 45 days, because it's counted from the eve of Ash Wednesday to the eve of Holy Thursday. Right, she sat down and counted, it's 45. And then we get to 50, and 50 is the year of Jubilee. And of course, Pentecost is on the 50th day after the resurrection. So you can see how the church took this over and made it our own, and we celebrate it in our liturgy. In the year of Jubilee, most people would did by 50 in Jesus' day, because people, that's why 70 is a very, very big age to get to. So this once in a lifetime event occurred, and the Jubilee year had a few features to it, but it had 3 really big ones. And I think this is stunning for us to think about in this Jubilee year. How do we personally, how does our parish set people free? How do we forgive? They forgave the debts, and they let the crops go fallow. So in ancient Israel, there was not intergenerational slavery. Slavery was their prisons. They didn't have prisons. So if you offended against somebody, you became a slave, either for the rest of your life, or, and then, at least as a Christian, a hopeful one. Optimistic people are fantastic. I love them. The bottle is half full. That through luck or the actions of others or their own hard efforts, the future is going to be successful and fulfilling. That's a good person to be. But Christian hope says something a lot different to that. And I think it's a bit richer for us, to be honest. Hope says that we work hard with all we have to secure a successful and fulfilling future. And by the way, always worries me when I hear any Catholics or Christians say, oh, well, I'll just wait for God to give that to me or to do that for me. The old line that our mothers told us, God helps those who help themselves. There's a very important truth in there. We've got to get active in the good things of our life, not just passive. The whole point of the Christian story is that God got active, and we're called to be active as well. So we work hard to do all we can, but we trust in God's loving care, knowing that we are connected to a greater narrative, a wider Christian family, and a life yet to come. I want to come back to that. We've gone soft on talking about the next world, about heaven, and I think that's a serious mistake. I don't think we know what language to use anymore, and people think we're sort of crazy if you talk about that. But actually, I don't think you can talk about Christian hope without talking about that. So I want to help you with what we might think about and how we might think about it. Christian hope and Christian trust are linked. What Jesus has promised, he will fulfill. And why does this matter more than ever before? Well, a couple of reasons. Firstly, because we I can't see that one. Yeah. Every single indicator we've got says that anxiety and self-esteem and depression are getting worse. Now, I want to just stop there. Some of you are analysts, some of you are scientists, some of you are psychologists. At least we have one psychiatrist here. We don't have studies of 1920 or 1955 or 1970. The first major study in the Western world starts in the late 70s about mental health indicators like we have them now. So we need to put a caveat around saying we're the generation with the worst self-esteem. I don't think self-esteem was great in the 30s, to be honest. I'm not sure mental health was brilliant in the 50s. And we know that by one indication. We know that men, for instance, probably had terrible mental health in the 50s. What did they do? They medicated with alcohol. They really did. Hallelujah. And they did. And we had a major problem. So, and we still do, so I'm not pretending, but I just want us to be a bit careful of saying this generation is the worst. It may well be, and there are signs that it might be, but we do need, I think, to be just hold our horses a bit, because we don't have the sort of comparative studies we would certainly like to have. But I think we should do a couple of things as a result of having very serious mental health issues right now, and we're speaking a word of hope to that. The first is we have to stand over against the happiness industry. I'm getting sick of tired of parents saying, "Father, I don't care what my kids do as long as they're happy." Why are we setting them up for that for? I don't know what your workplace was like or is like, but not every day that I come here to work is it deliriously happy. Not every day. As wonderful as it is, and it is wonderful, it's not always happy. And I don't know what your family life is like, but come live in a Jesuit community. Because not every moment is deliriously happy, I can assure you. And I'm probably the cause of most of the unhappiness in the community, so I'm physician heal thyself. But all this idea of happiness as a goal in life to be achieved, I think this is a serious error. Telling kids that we've got to be happy all the time. No, I want you to be joyful, but I want you to be resilient. I want you to be faithful, hopeful and loving. Now I know parents want that for their kids, but we don't say it. I'm an old English teacher. When you don't challenge language, the assumptions behind the words we use can take possession. And then all of a sudden, I'm meant to be happy all the time. I do not think that's helping any of us. Because I think we're all confident believing this, that we're meant to be happy. I'm not on my own here, of course. Hugh Mackay wrote a book against the happiness industry a few years ago, and that you might have read that book. It's wonderful. And you know, not every anxiety is bad. Again, we're being told that if you're anxious, well, that's not good. I think before you run an event in the Olympics, I think before you go for a job, you're nervous, you're anxious. There's nothing wrong with that. It's how you manage anxiety. But that's not what we're presently hearing. It's almost like all anxiety is bad. It could be, I think is the best Christian. Not every moment of feeling down is depression. Depression, I think, is a clinical situation with a clinical outcome and clinical treatment. And I've never had depression, but I have lived with Jesuits in community who have had chronic depression. It is an insidious disease. It's a heartbreaking disease. And I think we should respect it more by not saying everything is depressing. So for instance, when my sister died 8 years ago on the, 8 years ago, on the 16th of March, just gone, I was very down about that. She was 56 years of age. I was very down about that for many weeks. I could have become depressed, but I didn't. I was with a lot of support, your affection and love at the time, that helped me through. So we can be full of grief, we can be full of being anxious, we could be dealing with a big moment in our family life or my life, our health. That doesn't necessarily mean we're depressed. There are two other words I really wanted to challenge. You know, my mother, as some of you know now, has dementia, and I think we abuse that word. I used to abuse that word. If you can't remember somebody's name, that doesn't mean you don't have dementia. It doesn't mean you have dementia. If you can't find the car keys, that doesn't mean you have dementia. The old one, of course, you might have heard this before, is where you pick up the car keys and say, what are they for? That could be dementia. Now, my mother, a very strong woman, in fact, we had some funny moments with Mum and her, she's in 92 in August, and God, we've had some funny moments. I loved her a few years ago when her dementia became quite significantly apparent, that the geriatrician that she has in Toowoomba, a wonderful Australian-born Filipino background, a wonderful man, and he's really good with Mum, as you would hope such a person, what a great speciality to be in. And he said to Peter and me, my eldest brother, he said, look, you have to get ready for some changes to your mother's behaviour. The sort of dementia she has, she'll probably lose her filter. And my brother and I looked at each other and said, she never had one. I'm waiting to hear, at least in our family circle, you were never in two minds about what my mother was thinking about anything, I can assure you. And of course now, when Mum's dementia was going on, she asked me that she said one day to me, she said, it's not wrong to pray to die. This is some years ago. It's not wrong to pray to die, is it? And I said, no, you can't do anything about getting yourself there. Daily Mass-going Catholic, she said, oh, I don't know what I believe about heaven, hell and purgatory anymore, but knowing my luck, it all exists and I'd end up in the wrong place. So you pray that I die. You're a professional prayer. You pray that I die. And I said, okay, well, I'll pray that you die. And the next day, before I came back to Bristol to fly back to you, I went in to see her to say goodbye. She didn't even say hello. She looked up and she said, your prayers are hopeless. So apparently that was meant to be answered overnight. Do you know, when we talk about losing the car keys, not remembering name, that doesn't come close to the stripping disease that I'm seeing and that you know about. That doesn't come close. So again, I think we should be just a bit more respectful of the language. And the final one is a story against me. For years, I talked about having OCD. And I talked about that because I'm a bit of a neat freak. And so, for instance, my books are in descending order of height. Now, I'm visual, so I can put my hand on a book at any moment. I really can, within seconds, because I can see it and I know how big it is and I can grab it. And even in the community, I will have the glassware and the coffee cups in ascending or descending order of height, so I'm annoying to live with. And when I go away and I come back, they've all moved everything around. And I deserve that. I absolutely deserve it, because 5 minutes later it's back to where it should be. Because I've got to control something in the world, and that'll do. And so I used to laugh at myself and tell that story and say, well, I've got OCD. And you know, there was a young woman who came up, not a young woman, she's a middle-aged woman who came up and she said, you have no idea how hurtful it is to hear you talk about your books. When I had OCD for 16 years, I couldn't leave the house, and I was trapped in the house where I cleaned my house top to bottom 16 times a day. And then I had to start again because now it would be dirty and dusty. She said, you get this all the time, and I just want to give you some feedback that your coffee cups doesn't come close to OCD. You might have the propensity for it, it might develop in that way, but you have no idea how hurtful it is to listen to that. And I didn't really. I never had anybody give me that feedback before, and I would like to thank Evelyn right now. She lives in Melbourne, but I want to thank her because she raised my consciousness. So just because we're feeling down, just because we might be a neat freak, and just because we might forget the car keys, I think we have to be careful of the language that we use. And meaning is this. No one, a value that my value depends on my money and status. Young people certainly have that in spades. That what they do, how much they have, where they live, this all matters. But it's not an absolute value, at least not in the Christian tradition. It never has been. My freedom is always in conversation with your freedom. I'll give you an example of what I'm talking about. I want to get drunk. I want to not wear a seatbelt and speed at 120 kilometres an hour near a primary school when they're getting out of school. No reasonable person would think that was okay. Even in theory, they wouldn't think that was okay. But it would be my right to do it, and the state has no right to tell me what to do, goes this absolute stuff. And I think this is where individualism sometimes is just getting out of control. The personal pronoun, my life, my truth, my God, everything ends up being personalised. And while it matters, it's not the only thing that matters. That we have to be in concert and in communion with one another about all about personal freedoms. So we've seen this repeatedly, and I think it's we're seeing it really play out in the United States right now. I think we can absolutely see a very high value to their country has been personal freedom. It's good, but in the Christian tradition, as Pope Francis recently wrote to the US bishops, he said, this has always got to be meted against the common good. What's good for the majority of people, and especially the fragile, the vulnerable, and the poor. Pope wrote that to the US bishops about 2 months ago. We've never had more possibility for connections. We've never felt more isolated. When sometimes someone tells me they've got 23,000 Facebook friends, I really wonder if anybody knows them actually. Like, to what degree we're disclosing, but are we known? And they're not the same thing. So we've also got new addictions. Technology is a new addiction. If you think I'm making any of this up, the Illinois Center for the Study of Addictions at the University of Illinois has been for about 50 years the place in the world to study addictions. And they have the ones that we all know about: alcohol, gambling, sex, drugs, shopping. So there's method to the madness. But at least a sense of belonging. But it's not just us. Rotary, Alliance, Apex, trade unions, political parties, actually being a member of these. There's a breakdown in belonging. People don't know their neighbours. There's a breakdown in extended families. I grew up with, on one side, 33 first cousins. And on my mother's side, it was dad's side, on mum's side there were 27. She had a family of 7, dad from a family of 9. And we took Moses seriously when he said, go forward and multiply. I know all my cousins. I'm very close to them, actually. Some of them more, because I grew up in the same town as they did, Toowoomba. But I know them all very well. And we have reunions now. We have cousins' reunions, which is fantastic. It was a great sense of belonging. I lived in a Catholic ghetto when I was a kid. Like, who did we go to? Mum was a widow, as some of you know. She was a widow at the age of 32, and Dad dropped dead at the age of 36. Well, Mum told us that we had to go to Mrs. O'Toole or Mr. and Mrs. Mullins, who were not our immediate neighbours, but because they were Catholic neighbours. Even if there was a crisis, the Catholics are going to look after it better than anybody else. I'm not sure about that, to be actually honest. But that was the world we lived in. And my aunt used to, when she had Protestants move in next door to her one day, and at one period in our lives, and I can vividly remember my aunt saying to my mother, they're not Catholic, but they're very nice people. It seemed to have come as an enormous surprise. And apparently the Anglicans used to say it about us too, so there's plenty to go around. But I think that's one of the big things about belonging to the parish. We belong to the parish. And that's why days like this really matter, and all the other things, the parish dinner next Saturday night, where we start to meet people we don't normally meet, and we start to belong to one another. I think that really helps. Now, in this context then, what do we do to try and witness to Christian hope? Well, firstly, let's remind ourselves that we really belong to a very big, wide, worldwide Christian family. Billions of Christians, billions of Catholics. We assist in salvation. And finally, but very importantly for today, because it was today's gospel, there's nothing Jesus won't do for us. No matter how tough life gets, there's nothing Jesus won't do. Luke 15 is one of my favourite chapters. I've got a few, but one of my favourite chapters, worth reading from here on to Easter Sunday. Because Jesus was attacked because he dined with sinners, which is always an act of intimacy in the Bible, when you eat with someone, because you could have got poisoned. It wasn't a silly thing. So you didn't eat with people you were a bit dodgy, or they could have done something to you. You only ate with people you trusted, only ate with intimates. So he gets attacked for this, and notorious sinners, and then so he tells 3 stories. The lost coin, the lost sheep, and the 2 lost sons. The lost coin. Now, this is a woman who may well have actually had OCD, because she's lost a drachma. It's a penny, darling. Let it go. You'll find it eventually. It's a scent. And she sweeps and sweeps and sweeps until she finds the coin. That's the point. What the world considers to be worthless matters to Christ. We matter to Christ, even if we don't think we do. No one is worthless. That's the point of the parable.